How has recipe writing taught you to be more creative?
Recipe writing is very hard. People don't realize that. I mean, it's an art form, and it's a skill. Um, you know, not only does it apply to my blog, where you have to make sure if you get something wrong in your recipe, people are going to tell you about it. People are very willing to share when they post on your blog. I've got some really I've gotten some comments where I feel like I've really upset someone, So there's some people that leave funny comments. So you've got to be meticulous about making sure that you got to learn how to read what you're writing and make sure that it makes sense to people. It's chronological, that you're not leaving things out. Um, and then with cooking contests, you're basically graded on whether or not you write a good recipe. One example was the Build a Better Burger contest. This is a contest that they get 8,000 to 10,000 entries a year. It's a huge grand prize of $100,000. So the first year that I entered, I ended up getting into the finals. I was one of 5 finalists. So we're sitting there before the contest, and we're talking to the people that did the judging and of the initial batch, and they said that out of whatever 8,000 entries, there were a few hundred that were acceptable. That either didn't, and their rules are laid out very clearly. Make sure your ingredients are in order, very simple things like that. But they said people just they're not organized. They don't take the time to have a fresh set of eyes look at it if they're not used to writing recipes or just making sure that it makes sense. So it's a way of communication. You're giving someone directions on how to do something.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, in a way, it does help you to think very logically on how to teach people how to do things. And I think once you get comfortable with putting things like that down on paper, it also makes you more comfortable when you talk about a recipe and talk people through it. Because you're basically doing that in your head as you're writing down the recipe. So, it's kind of a stepping stone to maybe doing a recipe demo on camera.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of a training process.
And where does creativity come into that?
Well, as far as creating the recipes, you just got to get comfortable in the kitchen. It's the kind of thing where, get comfortable around the ingredients. You got to know what works. There are certain things that work together. I mean, when you think about a baking recipe, you have to have leavening. You have to have something that's going to make the thing rise. So, but you've got to know what works with what ingredients, So there's certain basics that each recipe has to have, and then you can start playing around with flavor profiles. And there are a lot of things that don't work. I've made some disasters, but you never know, because I've had some flavors that come together that are maybe unorthodox that end up being amazing. So it is a very creative process. I mean, absolutely. And it's a lot of just a lot of trial and error, and every once in a blue moon you get that winning combination.